There's one part of Chinese that trips up every single learner. It's not tones have clear rules. It's not characters have radicals. This thing has over 200 words, no obvious system, and if you pick the wrong one, every native speaker hears it instantly and looks at you weird. It's this weird little system that nobody prepares you for. Because most people hit the system and just start basically memorizing lists, flashcard after flashcard, and it never sticks because nobody teaches you why these words actually exist or how to pick the right one. But today we're gonna do that. I'm Sheldon. My team and I have helped over 600 Cantonese speakers improve their Cantonese and learn Mandarin. And the key thing is, while the system asks you to memorize over 200 words and their rules, linguistic research actually shows it can actually boil down to just 4 patterns. And if you learn these 4, you'll sound more natural than learners who've been studying it for years. So hopefully today, this can help you, and let's get into it. Starting with pattern 1, the patterns you already know. So first off, what is the system that trips everyone up? It's called a measure word. And here's the good news. You already actually know a bunch of them. See, in English, you say a bottle of water, a bowl of rice, a cup of tea, a plate of food. Okay, those are measure words. They describe the container or the unit. English already has them. You just never thought of it as a system. Now, the cool thing is Chinese actually has the exact same ones. 一碗饭, 一碗饭, 1 bowl of rice, 一杯茶, 一杯茶, 1 cup of tea, 一包糖, 一包糖, 1 bag of candy, 一罐可乐, 一罐可樂, 1 can of Coke, 一瓶水, 一樽水, 1 bottle of water, 一盤菜, 一碟菜, 1 plate of food. Now, Cantonese and Mandarin generally use the same container words, but as you can see in 2 of those examples, there are small differences. For example, for bottle for Cantonese, we use 樽, and Mandarin uses 瓶. For plate, for example, Cantonese uses 碟, and Mandarin says 盤. Think of it like British people say chips, Americans say fries. Same logic, different words. But the main point is 瓶, bottle, 樽, bottle, 碗, bowl, 碗, bowl, 杯, 杯, cup. These are container words. And these things you don't need to memorize. It's not complicated. Okay, they're just things that you just know, okay, in English it's this, in Chinese it's this. Okay, they're things you already have an instinct for. If you can say a bottle of water in English, you can say 一瓶水 in Chinese. The same logic, same instinct. And that's pattern 1. Okay, done. I gave you the container words there. Those are pretty much the main ones. You just need to look at it and just be like, okay, cool. A can is 一罐, 一罐, easy. There, you know what I mean? Nothing new here. Okay, this is basically things you're already used to. So why is this considered so hard then? Well, like I said, there's 4 patterns. That was only pattern 1. Because pattern 2 is where it gets tricky. Here's what makes Chinese so different from English and what makes this so damn hard. See, English doesn't need measure words for everything. 1 chair works fine, 1 dog works fine. No container, no unit word needed. But Chinese is not the same. In Chinese, every single noun that exists in this universe needs a measure word. Everyone, not just things that come in bottles and bowls, but dogs, chairs, books, knives, phone. Everything. And most of them don't have an obvious container or unit. And the problem is if you pick the wrong word, native speakers, they hear it the way you'd hear someone say, you know, 1 piece of cat, or even worse, 1 slice of cat in English. Not a good thing to say, okay? Wrong enough to wince. Now, studies constantly show that measure word errors are one of the most persistent mistakes that Chinese learners make. Beginners, intermediate, even advanced speakers keep getting them wrong because, like we mentioned, there are over 200 of these words. And so imagine like walking into a warehouse with 200 unmarked boxes, and each time you want to say a noun in Chinese, you have to grab the right box. No labels, no sections, no map. That's what learning measure word feels like. You got 200 options and 0 guidance. Most learners just start opening boxes randomly. That's the memorization trap. But here's the thing, and the key part that you're here for, is a study from 2023 tracked how often native Chinese speakers, not learners, native speakers in China actually use specific measure words in basically everyday conversation. Not formal writing, not textbooks, but rather how people actually talk. And the answer was only 13% of the time. And that 13% where native speakers do use specific measure words, it's not spread across 200 different ones. Most of it is actually just concentrated in just 8 tags. The remaining super specific ones, things like a wisp of smoke or a bolt of silk, that's maybe like 1 to 2% of actual usage. You can learn those later or never. Most natives barely use them either. So the key thing now for you is which 8 tags make up that 13%, and that's pattern 2, the meat of this video. After that, we still got pattern 3 and pattern 4, but pattern 2 is where the real learning happens. So let's start with the 3 cat scenario. Starting with, what measure words do animals need? This is the creature count, 在 or 只 in Mandarin. So like I said, you don't want to say a slice of cat, and the tag that fixes that is 只 or 在. And the rule is dead simple. If it breeds and moves, it wears the 在 or 只 tag. So in Cantonese, 一隻狗,一隻狗, one dog. Dogs, cats, birds, chickens, anything alive and moving. 3 cats. 三隻貓,三隻貓, 3 cats. A duck, okay? 一隻鴨,一隻鴨. A rabbit, 一隻兔,一隻兔子. A butterfly, 一隻蝴蝶,一隻蝴蝶. If it's alive and it moves, it's 只. That's the pattern. It covers everything from ants to elephants. This pattern feels easy, but if it was this easy, I mean, Chinese wouldn't be considered a hard language, right? See, where people get tripped up are the outlier cases. And I don't just want to tell you what they are. I need you to understand why they break the rule. Because once you know why, you stop memorizing exceptions and you start basically seeing the logic. Because for instance, let's say for example, one of the first things people notice, wait, I mean humans, we're creatures, you know, we're alive, we move, so we should be 在 or 只, right? Nope, people use a different measure word. They use 一个人,两个人, not 只, not 一只人. The reason why is because 只 carries a sense of creature. It's something you observe from the outside. So using 在 or 只 for a person sounds like you're calling them an animal. Okay, it's dehumanized. So there's a hierarchy, you know, humans are top. So we indicate animals as 在 or 只, whereas humans get something else. Then there's a fish. Fish are alive, fish move. So fish should also be 在 or 只, right? They're not. And the reason why is because when you look at a fish, the first thing it sees isn't alive, it sees long. And so shape overrides category. And we're gonna break this down properly next, but hold on to this thought, okay? It's the first clue that this system has a hierarchy. It's not just random. When 2 tags compete, the more visible feature wins. Before we get into the hierarchy, there's one more use of 在 or 只 that I wanna kind of feature here, which is 在 or 只 does something else that seems weird at first, which is that it covers one of a pair. So one hand, one shoe, one eye. So for example, in Cantonese, to indicate one hand, we say 一隻手, or in Mandarin, 一隻手, one hand. For a shoe, we say 一隻鞋, or in Mandarin, 一隻鞋, one shoe. And so you're probably asking, you know, why does the alive tag also handle one of a pair? Key thing to remember is that Chinese is a very old language that's constantly evolving. And so here's the logic. 在 or 只 meant originally one bird, a single bird that was separated from its flock. 在 or 只 doesn't just mean alive, it means one individual thing pulled from a set. Animals are one from the group. Hands are one from the pair. Same underlying logic. And that highlights another important thing, which is we use 在 or 只 for individual animals. Keep that word individual in mind because in the same way, 在 covers one shoe, one hand, one body part, but a pair of shoes that uses a completely different tag. And we'll get to that tag later on. But that's one of 8. And by the way, when I say, like, for example, individual animals, and I say, you know, 三隻貓, 三隻貓, 3 cats, that's 3 individual cats. It's different than saying a pack of cats. You know what I mean? Right? That's why with numbers, it's still 在 or 只. Anyway, that's one of 8. So 在 or 只 was about what the thing is, which is alive. Now let's get into the fish thing and the hierarchy because the next few tags are about what the thing looks like. And this is where Chinese gets a lot of fun. Because what about long things? Now the long tag is tiu or tiao in Mandarin. And here's where the system shifts from biology to geometry. See, in English, we don't classify objects by shape. A fish, a road, a snake, and a pair of pants have nothing in common to an English speaker. But to Chinese, they all share one trait, which is they're long. Picture the thing in your mind. Is it long and narrow? Whether it's stiff like a road or flexible like a noodle. If the dominant visual feature is length, it wears the tiao or tiu tag. Keyword is dominant, not just long. It has to be the most obvious thing about it is long. Because remember, there's a hierarchy. Okay, so for example, for a fish, let's imagine back then, you know, they saw the body of the fish in the river. But they might not have known it was alive to be honest. They just saw this thing and they call it 一条鱼 or 一条鱼. So 条 or 条 indicates that it's a long type thing. Okay, 一条. And so this is where the system really reveals hierarchy. Because yes, a fish is alive. It should be 在 technically, but they're long. And like you said in Chinese, shape overrides category because the brain sees long before it sees alive. So does this mean other animals that are long also follow this rule? Generally, the answer is yes. For example, snakes. 一条蛇 in Cantonese, 一条蛇. It's 条. This matters because it gives you a decision rule. When two tags could apply, ask what's the most visible feature, and that's the tag you choose. The best way to think about it is think about it from like a caveman perspective, right? What did they actually notice first when they saw something, right? Not what it actually was, because they probably had no idea what it was, right? That came later. They noticed the shape. Is it long? Is it flat? Is it round? And that instinct is frozen into the language today. I mean, roads are long too, right? For example, 一条路,一条路. Pants, for example, 一条裤子, one pair of pants. 一条裤子,一条褲. Okay, it's not one pair of pants, it's one 条 pants. Pair has a different word, okay? Pair has a different word in Chinese. Because pair indicates two. Pair of pants indicates, two sides to it, okay? It's not one pair of pants. 一条褲 is not one pair of pants. It's no translation, one long thing. Pants. Now, like I said, there's a specific measure word for pair. There's also a specific measure word for clothing, which we'll share later. But pants, right? Pants use the measure word for long things because when you hold up a pair of pants, what do you see? You see long legs, and the length is a dominant visual. And so again, the system isn't about what the thing is, it's about what the thing looks like. Now, here's a very common mistake. Okay, people learn that rivers use tiu or tiao because rivers are long. So they think, okay, well, lakes are also waters and they can be long too. So lakes must also use it. So 一条湖,一条湖. Nope. It's a different tag. A river looks long. A lake doesn't. A lake typically looks circular, to be honest. And another thing is sometimes the dominant visual isn't what you'd expect. Think about like a towel, right? A towel is typically like you lay it out flat, but most people would actually say 一条毛巾,一条毛巾. And the reason why is because when it's hanging, it's long. And so the dominant visual wins. And so that's why sometimes, right, it's not always obvious what it is until someone points it out and you're like, oh, okay, I can see how, the ancient cavemen or whatever saw it this way. Oh, okay, that makes sense. That's kind of how it is. Anyway, that's two down. Okay, long things were the tiao tag. So what happens to a flat one? Flat things are zheng or zhang in Mandarin, okay? Same principle. Basically, if it's a flat thing, that is zheng or zhang. And so the way you picture it is, could you slide it under a door, hang it on a wall, or spread it across the table? If you can, that's zheng or zhang. So, 一张纸,一张纸, one sheet of paper. Okay, and this is where the English parallel clicks a little bit, right? One sheet of paper. You're like, okay, well, luckily paper has a measure word for flatness. This one's a bit easier for English learners because it's like, oh, sheet applies to English as well. Now, while sheet works as an equivalent for English for paper, remember that English doesn't categorize every object this way. Chinese does. So for example, beds are also flat surfaces too, which is why we say 一张床 or 一张床, one flat surface bed. A table, 一张桌子,一张台 in Cantonese, one, a table's flat table. Now, 张 comes from this character over here, a bow, plus 长, long, which means to stretch or spread. And so a stretched bowstring creates a flat surface, and that's kind of the history of that word. Now keep in mind it gets very nuanced, right? An individual playing card, that's 张, it's flat. But a full set of playing cards, that becomes 一副牌, a set tag, okay? Different things for a set versus one flat thing. But the key to remember is like an individual flat thing is zheng. Now, one more thing to note is that most of the time, Cantonese and Mandarin use the same measure words, but sometimes they'll be different. This is actually one of those cases where Cantonese uses zheng for chairs. So for example, 一张档, because Cantonese sees the flat seat, whereas Mandarin uses a different measure word. Okay, and we'll get to that, which one they use later. But keep that in mind, okay? Sometimes Cantonese Mandarin, most times it's kind of the same, but sometimes it's different. Now, keep in mind, okay, remember how I said shape is more important than what it actually is? Well, there's another layer to the hierarchy. Why, for example, a photo is flat, 一张照片, or 一张相, a photo. A ticket is flat, 一张票, 一张票. But a phone, a TV, a tablet, those are also flat. They don't use the same measure word. We'll get to that later, but keep that in mind because sometimes what the thing does overrides what the thing looks like. Anyway, that's 3 done. So you got the shape pattern. Now, before we move on, the next thing in the hierarchy, there's one more shape tag, and it's probably one of the weirder ones, which is the round rule. This tag says I'm small and round. So pearls, teeth, stars, hearts, beans, diamonds, grapes, anything your brain pictures as a little sphere. Okay, now stars, I know stars doesn't make sense, but think about it, you look in the sky as a little circle thing. So in Mandarin, it's 颗, and in Cantonese, it's 粒. So 一颗星星, one star. In Cantonese, 一粒星星, 一粒星星. So one, little round thing, a star. Now notice, by the way, Cantonese uses a different word here, okay? So uses nup instead of ke. Nup literally means grain-sized, okay? Even more precise. So Cantonese doesn't just say round, it says, grain round. Mandarin also uses li, okay? The same word, nup, for very tiny little things like grains of rice or sand. But for most like small round objects, stars, teeth, hearts, gems, Mandarin reaches for ke as the main one. whereas Cantonese uses lup across the board. That's what's very important to remember. They'll use different ones sometimes, just how it is. So now a tooth, for example, in Mandarin, 一颗牙, round little thing, tooth. In Cantonese, 一粒牙, 一粒牙, 一颗原子弹. 一粒原子彈, 一粒原子彈, one atomic bomb. Now this one's important because an atomic bomb is neither small nor it's round, but the tag was inherited from 子彈 or 子彈, and bullets are small and round, and so they wear the same tag. So they kind of viewed it like its type of projectile, so they gave it the same measure word. And this is a fundamental thing about the system isn't always logical. Sometimes it's historical. New inventions might inherit old labels. Sometimes when the label doesn't make sense, it's likely because it's a new invention that inherited an old tag, okay, in the same family. Now, once again, this applies to individual things. So for example, one grape is 颗 or 粒, small and round, but a bunch of grapes changes. 一串葡萄 means a string of grapes. So once they're connected on the vine, they stop being individual round things and become a cluster, and so the tag changes, right? It's like a vine of grapes versus an individual grapes. Second thing is size is also an important factor of this one. Okay, a basketball is round, a watermelon is round, but neither of those would use nup or ke because they're not small and round. These ones imply small and round. There's no exact measurement, but think of it like if you can generally roll between your two fingers, you gotta squint to look at it, it's probably lup. Think of it like a grain, okay? Once it gets round and big enough like a watermelon, stop applying. Now, before we move on, I want the key insight to come in, which is that measure words aren't random. They're a visual system. The brain sees the shape, reaches for the tag, and it's kind of like sorting laundry. You have to know, okay, a long thing is this, a round, small thing is this, a flat thing is this. That is the shape side. Now, the next four things are going to be what the things are, their function, their structure, their relationship. These are faster because the logic is more obvious. So, for example, what about books? This is the spine spot, or ben, or bun in Cantonese. In English, you say one book, okay? No special words needed. But think about what makes a book different from a piece of paper. A piece of paper is flat, right? That's zhang. But a book has a spine. It's bound. You can open it. That's binding, and that's the tag. And so, bun or ben in Mandarin says, I have a binding. So for example, 一本书, 一本书, one binding thing, the binding is the identity. 一本杂志, 一本杂誌, 雜誌 is magazine, 本 is basically the measure word for things with binding. Even passports, they open like a book, so they get the book tag. In Mandarin, 一本 护照. In Cantonese, 一本護照本 originally meant root, the base of a tree where the trunk meets the ground. And so extended to the book, we think of it as the root text, the original copy. Okay, and so this isn't a shape tag like before, it's a function tag. Okay, what the thing is, not what it looks like. And that's the shift, because now it's about purpose. Now here's where it gets a little tricky, okay? A newspaper, for example, you think would be ben or bun, because it has pages, you can open it, but newspapers use fen or fan, which means a portion. And the reason why is because a newspaper isn't really bound, folded, not stitched. So that's bun. Now what about things with handles? Okay, like an umbrella. This brings us into the grip, which is ba or ba. This is my favorite one because it's the most physically visible. So ba or ba says you can grab me by a handle. If you imagine it as a handle, then use the ba or ba measure word. So for example, an umbrella, you grip the handle. That grip is a tag. So in Mandarin, it's 一把伞. So one handle umbrella, 一把伞. Or in Cantonese, 一把遮. So one handle umbrella. And so when it has a handle, the handle becomes a defining characteristic, which we use as the measure word. In Mandarin, 一把钥匙. In Mandarin, 一把钥匙, one key. In Cantonese, 一把鎖匙, 一把鎖匙. Okay, now the reason why is because today, keys don't really have a handle, but historically, keys had more of a handle, right? And so that's why it's like that. 一把刀, 一把刀, one knife, but the knife has a handle, so we go with the handle. 一把刀, 一把刀. And so you'll see here for a second, wait, a knife is long. Shouldn't it be tiu or tiao? But the thing is, a knife is long and grippable. So in this case, the handle tag overrides the shape. And so function beats shape. Okay, this is the hierarchy at work. Same as fish, where, shape beat category. And here, function beats shape. So handle is more important. Another example in Mandarin, we say 一把椅子. So 椅子 is basically a chair. 一把椅子. Okay, and the reason why is because chairs in the back have a little handle thing. Now keep in mind, remember this one earlier, I said that Cantonese sees chairs as a flat seat, 一張凳, whereas Mandarin sees them as the thing you grab by the back, right? 一把椅子. But here's a fun side tangent. Here's the thing, is that Cantonese and Mandarin, they're not talking about the same object, which means that Cantonese, we use the word dang, right? And it covers all chairs, including the ones with like a back thing a lot in the back. But in Mandarin, they differentiate between chairs. 椅子 basically they use as like a chair, like a legit chair, whereas 凳子 they use as a stool. And so when Mandarin refers to 凳子, they actually use 一张凳子 because they see the flat surface. And so sometimes it's very important to note that you'll see like Cantonese and Mandarin use different words, but in reality it's just more nuanced. Now, key thing to note though is a handheld fan is 一把扇子 because a handheld fan has a grip. 一把扇子, 一把扇. But however, if you have an electric fan, and I guess an upgrade, then the electricity, the motorization of it takes priority, and that's a different measure word. We'll get to that later. Anyway, that's 6 of 8, so we got 2 more, and 2 more are the most intuitive, pretty easy ones coming up. Next, we got the chunk one, which is phi or kwai in Mandarin. This is where basically English and Chinese are pretty similar because we use chunk. A piece of cake, a chunk of meat, a block of cheese, a slab of stone. In English, we already classify these pretty well. We just have 5 different words for it. Chinese has 1, which is phi or kwai. 一块肉, 一块肉, 1 piece of meat. 一块蛋糕, 一块蛋糕, 1 piece of cake. So the important thing is kwai or phi, whether specific or not, tells you it's been portioned. It doesn't have to be like measured, but it's like we cut off a piece of cake. Here's one we probably heard is in Mandarin, 一块钱, which is $1 or 1 yuan. Now the reason why is because historically money was in chunks. In Cantonese, we don't do that. We just say yap man, that man. But in Mandarin, we do that. Yap fai qin indicates like a chunk of money, a chunk of silver or gold, whatever they used. Now, something to keep in mind is a bar of soap. 一块肥皂. 肥皂 is soap. 一块 is a piece, right? It's a bar of soap. Okay, that's a solid chunk, it makes sense. But for a bottle of soap, typically we'd say in Mandarin, 一瓶洗手液, or in Cantonese, 一针干液. So we typically use a different word for soap as well to indicate like a bottle versus like a bar of soap. But most importantly, we use a different measure word. Like if we said 一瓶肥皂, people will still understand you. If you said 一针番干, people will still understand you. But technically, you should use 一针干液, or you should use 一瓶洗手液. Another important thing is kwai or phi handles metaphorical portions too. For example, 一块地, 一块地, 1 piece of land. The land isn't literally cut from something bigger, but the metaphor works. You're marking off a portion of a larger surface. Same way you cut a piece of cake from the whole cake, you carve a plot of land from the earth, right? So phi or kwai handles both literal and metaphorical portions. That's 7 of the 8 down, only 1 to go. And this last one's the easiest because it's something we see every single day in English. Okay, which is, remember the pairs from earlier, pairs. This tag says we come in 2s, and you already use this every day in English, which is a pair of shoes, a pair of chopsticks, a pair of glasses. English has pair, Chinese has the same concept. But this where it gets interesting is Mandarin and Cantonese use different words for this. So Mandarin uses 双, 双. So for example, in Mandarin, 一双鞋, 1 pair of shoes. 一双筷子, 1 pair of chopsticks. 一双眼睛, a pair of eyes. Cantonese uses 对, so 一對鞋, 1 pair of shoes. 一對筷子, 1 pair of chopsticks. 一對眼, a pair of eyes. Same meaning, just different words, right? Same as London uses chips, America uses fries. So remember in tag 1 we mentioned that set covers 1 shoe, 1 individual thing separated from the pair, but a pair of shoes, on the other hand, now uses these, right? 一隻鞋 becomes 一對鞋, or 一隻鞋 becomes 一雙鞋. Now, the thing that trips a lot of people up is that Mandarin actually has both shuang and dui. And the way they differentiate is a little bit funky. Cantonese uses dui for everything. Mandarin kind of has little nuances. So Mandarin, shuang is for pairs that function together. You need both shoes to walk, both chopsticks to eat, both hands to clap. Dui is for pairs that are a matched set. For example, twins, couples, earrings, each one works on its own, but they come as a pair. So twins, for example, in Mandarin are 一对双胞胎, that's twins. 一对耳环, 一对耳环, and the reason why is because earrings, you can wear 1 earring, you can mix and match. No one's gonna mix and match shoes. Well, technically can too, but not common. But earrings, they work alone, right? They just match. Now, honestly, this rule I just outlined, it's fuzzy because some items could go either way. You could mix and match shoes, but remember, this is ages ago, okay? The rules were made ages ago, which is why I love Cantonese, because Cantonese uses dui for all of them. You don't need to pick between 2 words, and that's the magic of Cantonese. Anyway, so that's 8 of 8, all 8 true tags done, and that's pattern 2. You're probably thinking, wait, there are still like 200 measure words out there. Like, what about cars, electronics? Am I just pretending those don't exist? We'll get to those. Before that, I want to quickly summarize the hierarchy we just covered, because this is what ties all 8 of those tags together. So when 2 tags can apply to the same noun, here's the order. So first is function, what thing does. If it has a handle, ba wins. If it's bound like a book, ben wins. If it comes in pairs, shuang or dui wins. Function is the most specific, so it overrides everything. Then we have shape, what it looks like. 体 or 条 for long, flat, 张 or 张, small and round, 颗 or 粒. Shape overrides category, and that's why fish use 体 or 条 instead of 只 or 在. Then we have category, what the thing is, alive and moving. This is the broadest tag, so it wins when the others don't apply. Now, there are exceptions, there always are, but this hierarchy gives you the right answer for the vast majority of cases, and knowing it means you can figure out almost any measure word you haven't seen before instead of guessing. Which brings us into pattern 3, which is the common extras. Before we cover them, the one thing I want to highlight is if you grew up speaking Cantonese, you probably already knew most of those 8 tags. Whether you use it right or not, you've heard them your whole life. Your parents, your family, something has been probably sorting the nouns by shape without you even knowing it, but now you know why. Okay, it was never random. It was shape, it was function, it was system. You just couldn't see the tags until now. And that's why I want to highlight is if you're a Cantonese speaker trying to learn Mandarin, you don't need to learn a lot of these rules and hierarchies from scratch. A lot of them already come intuitively to you because Mandarin and Cantonese share so many similarities. And what that means is you can learn Mandarin way faster than someone with no Chinese background at all. You just need to know the mappings between the 2 languages, and we have an entire free masterclass that covers all of that. And so it's a link down below, my gift to you guys, and it'll show you how you can use your Cantonese to help you learn faster and easier, and it works even if you sick time, sick gong, and you can't write a single character. Link down below, my gift to you guys. Anyway, like I was saying, pattern 3 is what we call the common extras, okay? These are measure words, and you pretty much hear them all the time. But here's the key. There's a special trick to all of these that makes them super easy. And that trick is pattern 4, which we'll get to. But anyway, these measure words are the common extras. So that is 辆 for vehicles or 架 for vehicles in Cantonese. So for example, 一辆车 is one car, or in Cantonese, 一架車 for a car in Cantonese. 一架單車,一輛自行車 for a bike. Okay, for vehicles, we usually use 輛 in Mandarin or 架 in Cantonese. Then we have 台 for machines and electronics, or 部 in Cantonese more commonly for machines and electronics and devices. So for example, 一台電腦 in Mandarin, or 一部電腦 in Cantonese for computer. Now note that 部 and 台 in Cantonese and Mandarin are pretty much interchangeable, right? There's a lot of overlap between them, especially for machines. So you could say 一台電腦, or you could say 一部電腦, or 一台電腦, or 一部電腦. Either work. One sounds more Mandarin, one sounds more Cantonese, but both work. They're pretty much accepted that they're going to be interchangeable for a lot of like the machines. 位 or 位 for people, but polite. For example, 一位老師,一位老師, one teacher. Use this one when you want to be respectful. 間間, this is for rooms and buildings. So 一間房, 一間房. 間 indicates basically a room and a building. 件 or 件 is for clothing and materials basically. So for example, 一件衫,一件衫, one shirt. Also used for events and incidents. So for example, 一件事,一件事, one matter. 支 or 支 is used for stick-like object. 一支筆,一支筆, one pencil. So that's for stick-like objects. So candles, cigarettes, bottles of beer. 份 or 份 is used for copies and portions, like we saw earlier. So 一份報紙,一份報紙. That's basically one portion of newspaper. Now, these are real measure words that native speakers use, but here's the key difference from pattern 2 for all of these, which is the pattern 4 word, which we're about to get to, is totally acceptable for most of these. Not what a professor would write in a front paper, but in casual conversations, I mean, native speakers swap in the pattern 4 word for these all the time. People understand, nobody winces. But the 8 tags in pattern 2, those are the ones where pattern 4 sounds genuinely wrong, okay? Where a native speaker would actually notice and be like, well, that's weird. That's the line. So everything above the line, everything in pattern 2, learn those specific ones. Pattern 3, be aware of them, but don't stress because pattern 3 can always fall back on pattern 4, which is basically the default. In Mandarin, the universal default is 个. Okay, in Cantonese, it's 个, same word. And if you don't know which measure word to use, that's the one. Use 个 or 个 every single time. That's a trick. So watch how it works. 一个人,一個人, right? One person. 一個問題,一個問題, right? One question. 一個問題,一個問題. 一個地方,一個地方, one place. 一個想法,一個諗法, one idea. One week, 一個禮拜, 一個禮拜, one reason, 一個原因, 一個原因, person, question, place, idea, week, reason. All of those, just use the basic default 個 or 個 in Mandarin. Here's the key, and this is where it all ties together, is that 個 or 個 acts as an acceptable substitute for everything in pattern 3. So pattern 3 with 個, totally fine. So for example, 我有兩個手機. In this case, it should be 我有兩台手機 or 我有兩部手機 or 我有兩部手機 or 我有兩 兩台手機, right? That's what technically should be, but you can totally say 我有兩個手機,我有兩個手機, totally acceptable. 一個房,一個房間,一個房,一個房間, totally fine. Technically it should be 一間房 or 一間房, but unless you have a grammar Nazi on you, totally fine. On the other hand, pattern 2 with the default, that's where it breaks, right? 兩個貓,兩個貓. If you use that instead of 只 or 隻, instead of 兩隻貓 or 兩隻貓, it just sounds off. 一個蛇,一個蛇, instead of 一條蛇 or 一條蛇 sounds off, right? 一個書,一個書 instead of 一本 or 一本書, it sounds off. And so that's the key thing is pattern 3, we can use that go again, nobody cares. Pattern 2, you can't. Okay, those 8 tags are the ones where the specific word actually matters. Okay, so for a huge portion of Chinese nouns, some estimates say around 40%, the default is the correct answer. Okay, there's no better option. So basically, when you don't know, just use the default. Use go or okay. So here's the thing, okay, 80-20. Learn the 8 tags from pattern 2. Pattern 1's are given in containers, right? Get familiar with pattern 3, and then use the default for everything else. And then the other ones, who cares about a wisp of smoke? Okay, nobody cares about a wisp of smoke. Nobody cares. I always tell learners, right, don't stress about measure words. No one cares if you get it wrong. My family friend has been saying 一個狗,一個狗 for years. Okay, her parents don't even correct her. Everyone understands her. Sure, it might sound a little bit off, but language is for understanding, right? And that's exactly what's accomplished with that. So use the default when you don't know. Natives do it. Every single person does it. And so it's totally fine. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Now click here if you're a Cantonese speaker who wants to learn Mandarin. Otherwise, click here for a video you think you'll love. Until next time, 再见.